All right, today we are diving into a totally new blueprint for building AI agents. It's one that treats safety and auditability not as features you tack on at the end, but as the absolute core DNA from the very beginning.
So get this. What if you could build AI agents with something like Lego bricks? These little genes that just snap right into a safety-first core. It's a really powerful idea, and it's pretty much the heart of the entire framework we're going to break down today. And everything we're about to cover is grounded in the 2025 paper Genetic Prompt Engineering plus Context Engineering, a genome-style architecture for safe, self-evolving AI agents by Nir Cohen. It really lays out a fascinating new way to think about agent design.
Okay, first things first, let's break down the single most important concept in this whole system. We're talking about the building blocks themselves.
So the core building block here is called a gene. And look, you got to forget biology for a second. In this world, a gene is just a modular instruction. It's a self-contained little component that shapes how an agent behaves. The best way to think about it is like a single, testable function for your AI.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Not all genes are created equal. The framework actually sorts them into two completely distinct families, and this creates a really crucial balance between what an agent can do and what it must do.
And the logic is actually super simple. Every single agent needs genes that define what it can do, its skills, its mission, and it needs genes that define what it must not do. These act as its built-in safety system, kind of like its immune response.
This table just lays out that division so clearly. On one side, you've got your core genes, which are all about building capabilities. For instance, the toolset gene, it literally defines, very explicitly, which APIs or tools the agent is even allowed to touch. Then on the other side, you've got resilience genes to manage risk. The immune gene, for example, acts like a firewall, actively blocking known attacks like prompt injections. All right, so we've got these individual genes. The next logical question is, where do they live? How do they all come together to form a complete functioning system?
Right. These genes aren't just floating around in some digital soup. They're organized into a very structured blueprint called a genome, and it's all built around this unchangeable, safety-first core.
Think of this architecture in 4 layers, kind of like an onion. Right at the center, you have the immutable core, which has safety rules called prime directives that absolutely cannot be changed. Wrapped around that are the adaptive genes we've been talking about. Now, the agent only gets information through a disciplined context stack, which is huge because it strictly controls what the agent is allowed to see for any given task. And finally, interfaces act like legal contracts governing exactly how that agent can use its tools. Let's just double-click on that core for a second. These prime directives, they are the non-negotiable DNA of the entire system. They are totally unchangeable safety rules that are inherited word for word by every single agent that gets created. There is no way around them. And what about that context stack? Well, its whole job is to prevent the classic rogue genie problem, where an AI perfectly follows a poorly worded instruction and causes a total disaster. The stack stops this by giving the agent precisely the information it needs for a task, and absolutely nothing more. Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but how does a builder, actually put this into practice and ship something without it being a huge mess? And this is the classic builder's dilemma, isn't it? How do you actually get started without immediately creating some bloated, over-engineered system that's just impossible to maintain? The answer here is the Minimal Viable Genome, or MVG. The whole principle is to start with the absolute smallest, safest set of genes you need to get the job done. You only add new genes when you have key performance indicators and hard evidence that prove they're necessary. No more guessing.
And here's the playbook for that. 1. You start lean, just the essential core genes. 2. And this is so important, you enable your key resilience genes like immune and lineage from day 1. Safety is not an afterthought. 3. You define a super strict context for the task. And 4. You measure everything, and you only expand the system when the data tells you to.
Now, what's also really smart about this is how the architecture is designed to prevent some very common and very chaotic failure modes we see all the time in agent development.
First up, gene bloat. This is when you just keep cramming more and more instructions into an agent until it gets slow, expensive, and totally unpredictable. The fix is that MVG mindset we just talked about. Don't add a gene unless you have hard data proving you need it. Next, you've got overlapping behavior. This is when different genes are basically fighting each other for control over the same action. causing all sorts of conflicts. You avoid this by being super disciplined about modularity. Every gene gets one clear, testable job, just like a well-written piece of software.
And finally, invisible risks. This is when something bad happens, like a prompt injection, and you have no forensic trail to figure out what went wrong. The answer here is those powerful resilience genes. Think of it this way. Immune is the bouncer at the door, blocking the attack. And lineage is the security camera system, creating an auditable log of every single thing that happens.
So when you put all of these pieces together, what you really end up with is a deeply, defensively layered system for safety and for reliability. And this quote from the source material just nails it. There is no single magic bullet for AI safety. It just doesn't exist. This is a defense-in-depth strategy, combining multiple layers of protection. You have the unchangeable prime directives, the IMUNE firewall, strict data schemas, audits, and of course, the ability to roll back changes.
So let's lock in the big ideas. It all starts with genes, these modular units for both capability and safety. They get assembled into a genome that's built on that rock-solid, immutable foundation of prime directives. As a builder, you start with a minimal viable genome, and you only add new genes when the data says so. And the whole thing is held together by strict interfaces that stop the agent from going off the rails with its tools.
We'll end on what is, frankly, probably the most critical single component for any agent that's going to interact with the real world, the immune gene. It's a simple deny or allow filter. It blocks malicious patterns like ignore your previous instructions, and it logs every single attempt for you to review later. It's your genome's first and most important line of defense. For any builder who is serious about safety, understanding this gene is absolutely the place to start.